Hello everyone, welcome to the second edition of Health with Eno. So this edition is actually aimed towards the teenage boys. The whole idea is still on our theme, choices, conquest and consequence. It could be a very interactive one, an educative one, and we're going to discuss real issues, real life issues and real life examples will be made. So just relax, sit back and enjoy the show. Thank you. We'll see you after the show as well.
Good evening, everybody. And thank you for honoring us. I'm so excited to have you around. It looks almost impossible, but by the grace of God and because of how special you are, God made it possible for us. And I'll just read a brief biography of our father. Engineer Adeleye Falade graduated from the University of Ibadan in 1995 with an honors degree in electrical electronics engineering. He obtained a master's in business administration in 2008 from the prestigious Henley Business School, University of Reading in the United Kingdom. He was also a participant in a program in London School of Economics in 2014. He started his working career in 1995 with Michelin Nigeria Limited and joined Shell Petroleum Development Company of Nigeria in 1996 as a production engineer in Nigeria. Much of his early career was in the maintenance and integrity skill pool, with side steps into operations, readiness and assurance, production operations, and change management. Between 2008 and 2015, he worked in several Shell Group operations in the Netherlands, Dubai, Iraq, Sakhalin, and Brunei. At the end of his extensive international exposure, he returned to Nigeria in 2015, where he took up the role of operations manager in Nigeria Liquefied Natural Gas Company, that's NLNG, where he currently works. Engineer Adeleye became a corporate member of the Nigerian Society of Engineers in 2011 and became a chartered engineer with Council of Registered Engineers in Nigeria. That's Korea, a year later. He's actively participated in development and advancement of engineering, both locally and abroad. He was the pioneer engineering and maintenance manager for Shell operations in Iraq, where he was responsible for capacity and capability development of locals and expatriates working in the company. Engineer Adeleye regularly speaks to audience on varied topics covering leadership, mentorship, and career development. He is a Christian and involved in discipleship relationship, as well as teaches in the Sunday school of his local church. Engineer Adeleye is married to Dr. Mrs. Adeleye Falade and are blessed with 3 children. Please can we give a round of applause for Good evening, sir. Welcome once again. So please, we'd like to know who Engineer Adeleye Falade is.
I come from a regular family. When I say regular, I mean irregular. I remember, I think it was about 15 years ago, I had a discussion with a young lady who was the daughter of the pastor of my church there. And I was correcting her on certain things she was doing. He was more rebellious. And she said to me, "Uncle, you don't understand. You've always been born with a silver spoon in your mouth." And I looked at her, I almost felt like spanking her on the head. But that taught me a lesson, and that lesson was that sometimes we look at people and we assume a lot of things about them. And I think we actually benefit by hearing people's background and how the grace of God has worked in their life. So I come from a regular family, parents, father, mother, and there are 5 children. And there's still a debate whether what my number is in that family. So it's a family of 4 boys and 1 girl. The girl is the last born. I'm one of the 3 and 4. I'm actually 3 because I'm a twin. So I have a twin brother who is number 4, and that means I have 2 senior brothers ahead of me. My mom was a teacher. My dad was a civil servant. And we just lived an ordinary life. There were people who were very honest, and there were people who were strict as disciplinarians. So they taught us the value and the dignity in hard work. They taught us to value honesty and to cherish family togetherness. My recollection of my dad was that he didn't have places that he goes to or friends that he keeps. The family was his friend. And usually when he closes from work, very hard working as well, you can be sure he's coming back home, and we all spend time together. When we were growing up, we went to a school. I went to public primary school. I went to a government secondary school. I also went to a federal university. And I remember that in our primary school, that was where my mom was teaching. So we go to school together, and then we all come back home together. And then when you come back home, you do all the chores. Like I said, there were 4 boys, 1 girl. The girl was the last. So in our house, there was no rule like it's the girls that handle the kitchen. Everybody is involved. And it was to the extent that we had a timetable. So if I'm doing breakfast, my twin brother is doing lunch, my junior sister is doing dinner. And then we also had a timetable as to who clears the plates, who washes the dishes. It was just like that. Typically, our day starts about 5 a.m. in the morning, 5:30 a.m. As civil servants, it was difficult for them to be able to make ends meet. So my mom had a poultry, and in that poultry, we all worked. So it was a poultry where we were doing about 18 crates of egg per day. So that gives you an idea of the size. And then we also had a farm. And we usually get on the farm, plant corn, we'll harvest the corn, sometimes about 60 bags. We make the feed for the poultry ourselves. So we had poultry, we had rabbitry, we had goat. When you come back from school, the first thing you do is after you have done your assignment, you get into the poultry. There were 3 rows. Each one of us had a row, and each person had a wheelbarrow, a rake, and a spade. Every week you rake, the birds drop in, you use your wheelbarrow, and then you take it to a place where we had created as a dump. And that served as manure for the farm. So our life was really pretty much around that. But it was also one that our parents allowed us what we call outing. So outing, twice in a week, you're allowed to go out and go and play with other kids in the neighborhood. And those are times we go and play community soccer, everybody running up and down. So I had a childhood that was really, really fun. And I went to secondary school, Government College Ibadan. It was a school that the 4 boys went to, gained admission to University of Ibadan, gained admission to study electrical electronics engineering. In my 4th year, which is when you do your long IT, 6 months IT, while I was doing that, I lost both my parents, 51 days apart. My dad first, 51 days later, my mom. So that was a really challenging moment for us. A week after my mom died, we buried her. The next day, I started my final year with my twin brother. The 2 guys ahead of us had finished school. They were working, and they just started working. So it was myself, my twin brother, and our junior sister that were still in school at that time. But God saw us through. And I remember one of the things I said to my brother, that was my eldest brother. One of the days we were talking, there was an experience, and I made up my mind that the day I write my final exam, I wasn't going back home to ask for money. And I expressed it to him. And he said, "Hey, I understand what you mean, but don't say that." But I never went back after service. After I finished my final year, I went straight to service. I never went back home to collect anything. Not pride, but that's just been my experience. When I started serving, 3 months to the end of my service year, I was employed by my company. And even though I wanted to resume, I was told, no, don't. Wait till when you finish your service and then you can come and start. So I started working for Shell 22 years ago. And it's been a fantastic experience. So that summarizes who I am. I got married 17 years ago, 17 going to 18 now, to a fantastic lady. She should have been here now, but our last daughter is not feeling fine, so she had to take care of her at home. 3 wonderful kids. Grateful to God for the gift of those children. We continue to move around all the places that we have been, and it's been a pleasure having a family that supports you. Rich family culture. Last week, Sunday, so 6 days ago, the firstborn turned 50 out of the 5 children that I talked about. And they provided an opportunity for all of us to get together again. Once every year, we all get together, even if we don't see, although we see ourselves. But once every year, all of us with our families, we meet at my eldest brother's house. And now we have cousins who are joining us as well. And sometimes we get up to 50. It was a tradition my dad started when he was alive. First Saturday of every year, he gathers all his siblings. And he is the first of 19 children. His father was polygamous. He had 5 wives. My dad was the first. The last time I counted those of us that were cousins were about 149. It was such a big community. But we find time to get together. So
that story is very informative. I picked a lot from the story. You know, sometimes you always feel you're born with a silver spoon and everything is always rosy. But it's until you hear people's story, then you know it's not as rosy as it always seems. And I like the fact where he mentioned chores. Like, they did not have chores for girls and say, okay, boys, you sit down and play soccer while your sister is there doing all the chores at home. So that's a good one. And then I also picked humility. Having to go to the farm, push the wheelbarrow. There are some young boys that are like, I'm too big to be pushing this thing. Or what if my friends see me? But that understanding too, that this is actually what is helping my family. I have to help my parents. And they all did it and accepted it, embraced it. And I'm sure he will tell us later how it's impacted his life. On the topic, choices, conquest, and consequence, how does that resonate with you?
we are today is a product of choices that we have made. Who we could have been is also a function of choices that we either made or we didn't make. And in our choices, you have consequences. Those consequences can be positive, they can be negative. But when we talk about consequences and we talk about conquest, they are natural outcome of choices that you and I make every day. Are we together? So you will always be making choices. Your being here this evening is a choice. And what you get out of it is either a negative consequence or it's a positive consequence. So we keep on making choices. And you will make many choices in your life. You're going to make choice about the course you will study, about choice about who you will end up marrying. You make a choice, conscious choice about who you will become in life. And you can never be free from making choices. In fact, not making a choice is a choice in itself. Because you have just chosen that I want to stand on my own. So you will make choices, you have made choices, you will continue to make choices, and those choices will define who you are. Now, there's a challenge that they have currently in the United States, and I think that's also creeping into our own society. If there is a problem they are dealing with, is the problem of fathers not being available at home, where they have kids, and they are not there to take care of those kids. And at some point, we as a nation too started getting there, where you have husband and wife really working, and working till late, and they are not at home. And who takes care of the children? Sometimes it's the nanny. Sometimes those children just wander around. And in few instances, they've turned out well, but in most instances, they have not. But it's a result of choice that people have made. So sometimes you sit back and you wonder about the progress you have made as individuals and the heights that you have reached. And you're asking yourself, against all this height, what do I have to show for it? And you start facing the consequences of your choices early on. Unfortunately, it's so difficult at those times to wind back the hand of the clock. So we live with the regrets of our choices. And you and I will make choices, whether you like it or not. People will make choices for you, but it's up to you to accept the choices that people have made for you. So who you will be, it's going to be a function of your choice. And some of us have decided that in life, we will choose excellence. We will choose hard work. We will choose to be honest. But more than that, we will choose to remain faithful to God. And as we make those choices, they continue to shape our lives and they continue to define our values. Now, let me talk a little bit about values. Because when we talk about values, people ask you, so what's your value? And somebody defined values. He said, values are principles. Can we say it together? Now, what's a principle? So, a principle is anything that remains constant, whether it's in Nigeria, it's in Europe, it's in America, it's in the Middle East. It doesn't change. Location doesn't change the truth of a principle. So how many of us know about the law of gravity? Does anybody know about the law of gravity? What does it say? Anything that goes up must do what? Must come down. So if I throw a pen up here, it will come down. Is that right? If I do it in the United States, will it stay up? It will come down. If I do it in Iraq, will it stay up? It will come down. Why? Because it's resting on a principle. Now, values are principles that we live by and we die by. They are things that shape our lives. They are not dependent on whether I'm with a right group of people or I'm with a wrong group of people. My value remains my value. And you make a choice as to what your value is going to be. What do you value? When you get into struggles and you're not sure how to address it, what will bail you out is the value that you have chosen. So if I say my value is that I will be honest, come what may. What that means is that there are opportunities that will come across my path that will want me to decide to take a shortcut. But because of my value, what will I do? I will say, no, I won't do it because I have a value that I have chosen. There is somebody who said that life, what you get out of life, is 10% of what is presented to you, but it's 90% of how you respond to it. In other words, where you are, where you will be, cannot just be because they like me or they don't like me. He said it's 90% left with me is how I have chosen I will respond to it. So you make a choice. You get to your workplace, people will be doing all sorts of things. You will make a choice as to whether you join or you don't join. Are we together? You get to your school, and in your schools you find some boys are joining some groups that they are doing some terrible things. But you make a choice whether you want to identify with them or you don't want to identify with them. Who you will turn out to be eventually is going to be down to the choices that you make. And you must take responsibility for it. So choices we will make. They have consequences. They can make us to be conquerors, but we are never free from making choices. And we better be prepared that our lives will be full of choices. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Okay, we come to pressure, peer pressure. There's this belief that the pressure on this generation is more than the pressure of the previous generation. Sir, I would like to take and understand what it means to you this generation, is it that they are not handling the pressure well enough, or it's just so overwhelming for them? Thank you.
I think an appropriate question. And I won't deny the fact that the pressure of today is much more than the pressure that we faced when we were your ages. When we were your ages, we were saved from a lot of things. For you to see anything that your eyes should not see, you need to actually make effort, deliberate effort to do that. But it's not so nowadays. Whether you like it or not, everywhere you go, either on the social media around you, you keep seeing things that you really don't want to see. Are we together? How many of us are on Facebook? Okay. Which other one are you on? Instagram. I've been hearing some of late. They talk about Pinterest. They talk about Snapchat. They say all sorts of things. Some of us are too old for that now. But when you turn on social media, it doesn't ask for your permission at times before you are presented with images that you don't want to see. So I think it's very right to conclude that nowadays, the pressure is much more than it had ever been. The things that we didn't think about when we were at your ages, 30 years ago, 35 years ago, today is almost becoming normal. And I know one of the things that we used to pride ourselves in at that time was the fact that as a young boy, as a young girl, you were straight. Nowadays, you are looked at as being abnormal if you are straight. People actually think something is wrong with you. If you tell your friends that, oh, I haven't done, or they try to suggest something to you and say, I don't know what you're talking about, say you don't know what I'm talking about. Who are you? Where are you coming from? And just the way they react to you in itself seems to put pressure on you. So nowadays, the pressure is enormous. Unfortunately, many of our parents are also not around us when we are dealing with those pressures. Unfortunately, many of the decisions that we make and the positions that we take in today's ages are decisions and positions informed by what our friends have said to us or suggested to us. So we can't deny the fact that the pressure is much and the peers are putting it more and more on today's children. But does that make it a hopeless situation? I just to say no. Because in your generation, there are people who are still standing firm and standing straight. There are people who are still light in your generation. And there are people that even though parents' influence exists, they've made conscious effort who they would be. How many of us know the story of Joseph? How many of us know the story of Daniel? Daniel was a young man who made up his mind and said he was not going to defile himself with the portion that was being served, even though that portion was inviting, succulent, sumptuous. Any word you can use is what you would see, and your head will go gaga. But Daniel said, I will not. He made a choice. And that choice was extremely influential in who Daniel became. Joseph made a choice. He was a young guy when he was also presented with pressure that should make him to bow. So the fact that iniquity abounds now is not a justification for us to say, I don't have a choice. No, you have a choice. Just like I read to us in that poem, Angelumaya said, I choose to rise. I choose to rise. So there is peer pressure. It is huge in this generation, but it's not an excuse for us not to still stand and be in light for God in our time.
In Christianity today, is it that Christians are afraid or ashamed to stand out and declare who they are, where they find themselves, in school or at work?
It could be a mix of shame. It could be a mix of fear. it could also be as a result of the fact that we want to enjoy the pleasure and we're ready to do anything to have that pleasure. And the pleasure comes. But with pleasure also comes a lot of compromise. It's not all pleasure that are good. The Bible talks about the care of this life. It talks about the pride of life. It talks about the lust of the eyes and the lust of the flesh. And many times that overrules our mind because they appeal to our emotions. But every time that dominates our life is because we have exalted our own pleasure above our love for God. If our love for God is high, then it will always trump where it is being challenged. So every time I bow and I decide to take a bite, every time I decide to look the other way and enjoy the pleasures of sin for a while, it means that my fear of God, my love for God, is lower than my desire for those things. And if that happens in your life and in my life, then we are weak as God's children. Where we must get to is a point where we allow the love of God to be so dominant in our lives that we will fear sin more than we love pleasure. That was what happened to Joseph. And in our workplaces, if we come to the conclusion and say, what's the worst thing that can happen here? The worst is maybe I'm not promoted. Perhaps I'm even sacked. And I then come to the conclusion, even if that happens, so what? If I can reach that conclusion, I will stand for God. If I do recognize that even though God is not physically present, his eyes sees me, then I will respond differently. When Joseph told Potiphar's wife his reason, he said, how can I do this and sin against who? Against God. He didn't even say against Potiphar. And was God physically there? But he recognizes that there is a God that sees all things. In the book of Psalms, he said, where can I go from your presence? He said, where shall I hide from you? If I go to the highest height, you are there. If I go to the lowest place, you are there. If I ask darkness to cover me, he said, your eye sees. They are brighter than light. So there is nowhere, nothing that I do that God doesn't see, that God doesn't know. If that consciousness rests with me, then my choices will be different. And I will approach things in a different way.
As young boys with jumping hormones, in quotes, at a certain age, you find the other sex attractive, and people are dating, boyfriends, girlfriends. How can a child of God put themselves under check and not be moved by the hormones, in quotes?
I think the first thing that you need to do is to have friends who espouse the same value and character that you would like to be. If you keep friends with somebody who is a serious smoker, it's a matter of time. You will join. If you keep friends with somebody who all he does is look for the next thing in skirt and try to misbehave, it's a matter of time. You will what? You will do the same thing. You remember I talked about value? What did I say value is? There are principles that you live by and you are ready to die for. And can two work together except they agree? Is either one changes the other or the other changes one. So, for me, the first safeguard is in your choice of friends. In the multitude of people who have similar mind, there is safety. It's difficult to have a violation of your value and your principle when you don't have somebody that is not sharing the same value with you. It's difficult. But even when you and I feel weak and we are feeling, I don't know what to do, there is a friend who is around that helps you to keep your head straight. And one of the things that can be a tragedy for you guys is to be alone and not have somebody that is a friend in your life. We have seen people who are called loners and their lives are nothing to write home about. Because you will have times when you are confused. You will have times when you need counsel. But blessed are you when the person that is around you is somebody who shares your value and helps you to stay on the straight and narrow path. God has provided that person for your safety. God has provided you for the safety of that person. And then as we continue to mature in our growth in Christ, as we continue to grow as God's children, we develop strong roots that beyond everything, we're like a Daniel, we're like a Joseph. That even though we don't see God physically, we recognize his presence by our side. And that shapes our thoughts, it shapes our decision. While we were growing up, we had the acronym WWJD that says, what will Jesus do? So when I have issues, I keep asking myself, if Christ were to be here, what will he do? And if I can be sure what Christ will do, then I'm clear what I need to do. So for me, you need to have those safeguards around yourself. You also need to grow your roots as a child of God. And you need to make sure that you continue to be a positive influence to people around you. It doesn't mean that things won't come. They will come. But it means that you have enough stamina to be able to withstand the pressure that comes from all those issues that could make you to derail.
Thank you, sir. The society today, does it influence the choices we make in our careers as young boys and men?
To some extent, yes, because at every point in time, there are dominant careers. When I say dominant, I mean the ones that people do most. So if I take the time when my grandfather, during his heydays, the thing to do and have as a career is that you're a businessman or you're a businesswoman. And for them who are in that category, they were extremely wealthy. They were considered the right set of people. In my own parents' generation, it was to work for the government, civil service. Those of them that graduated from school, right from the time when they were graduating, the government was already waiting with a job offer, a house, and a car. Most of the time at that time was a Volkswagen Beetle or a 504. It was the place to work for. When it got to my own generation, it first was the oil sector. And then it started moving. You had the banking sector, and then you had the telecommunications. There's nothing that says that when it gets to your generation, it will still be that it won't change. So there is an extent to which society helps us to say, if you want your child to be successful, then that child has to be a doctor. And I can remember many of us growing up that our parents had already made choices of what we will study. My son will be a doctor, my daughter will be a lawyer, my child is going to be an engineer. And why did they make those choices? Because when they looked into the society and looked at those that are respected and those that were well-to-do, there were people that were in that category. Now let me drive it a little bit further. When I was growing up, for you to say, I want to go and play football, is a crime. Today, parents are asking their children, don't you know how to play ball? Because they see the money that footballers are earning. And they say, maybe this child can also do that. Are we together? So now we see a shift where even now, parents are saying, let me expose my child to play lawn tennis, to play football. Perhaps this is going to be the next Messi that will bail out our generation. So there's a way in which society shapes the choices of career. But having said that, individuals must still understand where their strength lies. And parents play a lot of role in helping us to understand that. Our parents, because they observe us, they see the things that we are naturally gifted in doing. They're able to guide us and to steer us. But that in itself still doesn't mean that you have missed the boat if you end up not studying what you want to study. So there is a role that society plays. There's a role that our parents play. But whichever way, whichever role they play, whatever we do, there must be things that brings honor to God. And at any point in time, we have clear conscience that we are doing it.
The music industry today, it looks like it's really bringing a lot of finances to the youth. And what's portrayed sometimes I see it as it's not real. Like you see them on blinks and exotic cars and all that. So how would someone who genuinely has a passion for music survive in the media industry today?
I think the first choice to make is strive for excellence in it and be extremely good at it. I've heard stories of people that are in the Nigerian entertainment industry today, particularly music, that they actually started from the church. And you know, in our churches, we give people opportunities right from, you have the children choir, you have the youth choir, you have everything. They're all training opportunities. If there's anything that is unfortunate, is that many are not using that gift to honor God anymore. But I think the first place to start, really, is be very good at it. And how do you become very good in things like music? You need to practice, you need to practice, you need to practice. You could have a raw talent that God has given you, but if that talent is not nurtured, it just remains a talent. It's not going to achieve anything. So if you become excellent at it, then it means that it's actually able to project you and take you to places. So just like the scripture says that the gifts of a man makes room for him and brings him before great men. A gift that is well nurtured and well utilized will take you to places. But what would then determine whether you remain faithful to it are your values. God will take us places, guys. What would make you stay true to God are the values that you have defined for yourself and adopted when you are young. And God is interested in that you get that values right. That's why I'm excited at what you are doing. Because it's an opportunity for you to get it right. It is not when you get to stardom, when you get to the limelight, and then you start thinking, so what's the value that I should adopt? It's too late. In fact, those values are the things, the foundation that God uses to keep you, to stay true to him as you continue your journey in life. Most of us that messes up, we mess up not because we want to mess up. We mess up because we don't have values that keep us. What will keep the hand of a man from getting into the till and taking what doesn't belong to him is his value. And as that value is being solidified, when you are not tempted, while you are trying to erect the structure and make sure that it's strong, you will face the challenges because the wind will come, the storm will come, the temptations will come, but what keeps and anchors you on it is those values that you have developed. So whether it's in the music, entertainment, or anyone, you must have your values. It's an anchor for your soul that keeps you steady. So that as the storm blows, that's what holds you from flowing with the storm. If you are going to withstand peer pressure, it's because you have values. And as God's children, our value must anchor on the word of God. Our soul must anchor on who God has called us and defined us to be. And we must allow that to continue to shape our lives. What you will be, where you will get to, is not going to be down to how much you dance around. It's a function of how much opportunity God opens up for you. And the scripture says, if the way of a man pleases God, he said he will even cause him to be at peace with enemies. He said the race is not for the swift. The battle is not for the strong. It's time and chance that happens to everybody. God is the one that works in us both to will and to do of his good pleasure. So the things that I know today, I can't take credit for it. I can only thank God because he has chosen to allow those things to become clearer to me. If God doesn't make it clear to you, there is nothing you can do. And the things that people struggle after, because your way pleases God and God chooses to cause those things to fall into your place, you appear to be making progress. And people will try and understand and will say, oh, how come? What is it doing? What's that doing? It's because you have anchored your soul on what is important, on who is important, and that's on the Lord Jesus Christ. So he defines your values, and he helps you in everything you do, in everything that you become. He keeps you straight And all you are seeking for is that, God, in this situation and circumstance I found myself, how can I bring glory and honor to you? And that will happen in your school. That will happen when you get to secondary school. It will happen in your university. It will happen in your workplaces. It will happen in your family. At every point in time, you are going back to the anchor and say, how does this resonate with the anchor of my soul? And that's how we continue to make progress. We don't get carried away, even though we're in the entertainment industry. So in singing, entertainment, music industry today, are there not Christians? There are Christians. Are they all compromising? No, they are not all compromising. So for the ones that are not compromising, why are they not compromising? Because they have an anchor for their soul, which rests in the values that they have defined. And that keeps them going. Does it mean that there are opportunities they will not miss? There will be opportunities that they will miss. Not because of anything other than the fact that it does not align with the values that they have. Are you with me? If you don't define it, if you don't get it right, you'll be tossed by everything that comes across your path. Everything that presents itself as an opportunity will be things you will go after. Not all of them would lead you to an end that you desire. So entertainment in itself is not a challenge. There are Christians who are there. But will you remain true to who you are as God's child? It's going to be down to the anchor of your soul.
It says, does being domesticated make you a lesser man?
Usually when we talk about domestic staff, we talk about people who work at home. Examples? Drivers, cook, steward. We said they are the domestic staff. Does that make you a lesser person? No. It doesn't. It doesn't. In fact, some of the training that we will have in life that will take us to greatness, we'll actually get them while doing those kind of work. One of the things my mom taught us when we were growing up was that you could actually have a farm. And we lived in the government quarters. In the government quarters, there is huge expanse of land. So you have a house on almost 1 acre. So there are parts of the compound that my twin brother and I will go and farm on. And we planted tomatoes, we planted yam. When it gets to harvest time, we harvest it. Mommy will take it to the market and sell it and give us the money. And then we put it in our piggy bank. And by the time we were able to get like 13 naira at that time, that's what we used to buy one watch then called disco watch. I don't know, you guys perhaps you don't know disco watch. It's a watch that once you press something, you will see light. It was from the money of the farm. There was some of the yam that we eat in the house. And we were happy that we were part of contributing to what was happening in the house. My mom would take it to the market. My mom would sell it for us. When we finished secondary school and we were waiting to go to the university, we had to wait for about 1.5 years. So we said, rather than wait, why don't we do something? So we got an uncle that introduced us to rabbitry. So we started with 2 rabbits, 2 female, 1 male. And we took a loan of 45 naira then to start buying the feed and all. And eventually we grew to the point that we had about 70 rabbits. We were selling it. When we gained admission to the university, we told my dad he shouldn't bother to spend any money to buy any equipment for us. Technical drawing set and all that. That we had enough money from the sale of our rabbit that we could buy it. For the first 3 months, we didn't go home to ask for anything. But they were all being done when we were domesticated. So for me, hard work was never an issue. It's dignity in hard work. But that foundation was laid while being domesticated. And I'm sure if you ask many of our aunties today, they will tell you that much of what they learned it when they were growing up. Sometimes when mommy would say, you must do these house chores, you must do that, and we think they were punishing us. What we didn't realize was that those were opportunities that they were using to develop us, that then helped us as we grew up in life. So it doesn't make you a lesser person. I think it actually prepares you for greatness in life.
Thank you very much, sir. Please, can you give a round of applause for this session?
Thank you so much for your turnouts. Indeed, I'm honored, and I had such a lovely time with you all, and I hope you learned a lot from our speaker. And what I want to say is always keep on adding value to yourself, value to your society, value to your nation, value to the world in general, and above all, continue adding value to the kingdom of God. God bless you, and see you next time.